sharing my screen. Beautiful. Okay.
Here we go. Okay, everybody, we are recording. So welcome. This is week 2, and this week we are going to be learning about the state legislature, how it works and why it does what it does, how to interact with it. I'm going to ask people to stay on mute here, and I'm just going to mute people just to keep the sound down in the background here. Please, as we go, if you have any questions, put anything in the chat or just unmute yourself and call on out. We're a small enough group where we can do that. But thank you all for being here, and yeah, let's keep going. So tonight, this is what we're going to be learning, and welcome, Armando. Welcome. So this is what we're going to be learning tonight, State Legislature 101. It's going to look a lot like a civics class. I know a lot of people here never had a civics class, but that's, if you have, it's going to look a lot like that with a twist, of course, because we tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth here. So it's going to be an in-depth civics course. We're going to have a discussion about what do legislators care about. We're going to look at things from their perspective and really ask, what do they care about? And we're going to talk a little bit about the promise of democracy as well. So first question. I'm sorry, I'll get to this question in a second. First, let's just think about the state legislature for a second, state government. And it's not something that a lot of us think about too often. Some of us think about it a lot, of course. But, if you think about state governments, it's nice to think about how every state in this country has the same federal government, but every state in this country has different state governments. And every state in this country is very different, despite having the same federal government. And that's because state governments and local governments have a whole lot of power. They determine a large part of most things in our lives, ranging from education policy to infrastructure, wages and labor rights, energy policy, healthcare, democracy laws, our state tax structure like property taxes, gas taxes, sales tax, tolls, those kinds of things, gun policy, and much more. A lot of things are determined at the state level, and that's why the states look differently. State government holds a whole lot of power over our lives, and it makes many of the decisions that shape our lives. And so I just wanted to start with a discussion question as we kind of zoom in on the state level here. How many politicians can you name at the federal level versus the state level? Just think about that for a second. Which one can you name more of?
I probably heard more of federal, not necessarily state.
Right? Who else kind of feels that way, that you can name more federal politicians than you could state politicians? I'm seeing some hands go up here. Right? Why is that? Open it up for a quick question. Why is it that we can name, and I'm making an assumption here that we're all in the same boat, that we can all name a lot more federal politicians than state politicians, even though state politicians arguably have more influence over our lives.
What's in the news? Listen to the news, they're going to say I hear more federal than state.
Absolutely, right? Or when we're watching the news is often focused at the federal level, and we often consume that national news, not local news or state news. Right? CNN is not going to cover what's happening in Harrisburg. They're covering what's happening in DC. So anyway, let's focus in on the state level. Oh,
Michael,
sorry.
I was also going to say the demise of newspapers around the state.
Absolutely.
So we don't know what's going on.
Right? There aren't many folks covering the legislature. There aren't many journalists in Harrisburg. There's a half dozen beat reporters or so, which is just nothing compared to what's directed at the federal level. And local newspapers are closing down. They're going through hard times. Their business models are changing. There's fewer of them than ever before. Yeah. Right, we're very much kept in a focus on the federal level. That's what's on when you turn on the TV 99% of the time. And so we're going to look at the state level. That's what we're focused on. So what is the state legislature? We're taking a civics course here. 3 branches of government. The legislative branch makes the laws. The executive branch carries out the laws. The judicial branch evaluates the laws. State government, just like the federal government, has these three branches. Our state judicial branch, we're going to start on the right side here, is led by our state Supreme Court, and it reviews the legality and constitutionality of laws when they're challenged. It says this law is legal and constitutional, or this law is not. Democrats currently control the state Supreme Court and have that locked in a majority into the 2030s, because that's the way we do it. Supreme Court justices at the state level, they're not appointed like federal Supreme Court justices. They are elected by the people, and they run partisan elections just like the governor does, just like the president does. And the recent price tag on our last round of state Supreme Court elections was $22 million in campaign contributions. And then we have the executive branch, the one right there in the middle. The top of our state executive branch is the governor. We also elect our lieutenant governor, who's a figurehead who has very little power, our attorney general, who's the chief law enforcement officer, our auditor general, our chief fiscal officer. We have our state treasurer, who heads our treasury, and all of these elections are also partisan and statewide, and they all cost money as well. And our last governor's race cost $110 million was the price tag on our last governor's race. And so there's these three branches of government, of course, and the legislative branch is what we're focusing on tonight, and what we mainly focus on is March on Harrisburg. And we focus on the legislative branch at the state level, which is called the state legislature. That's what we focus on. And the state legislature is the central decision-making center of our state government. It is the legislative branch at the state level. It writes and passes the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And the state legislature has 203 state representatives and 50 state senators. Our state legislature is full-time with a starting salary of over $100,000, per diems close to $200 per day, great reimbursements, great health care, and a great pension. They are a full-time legislature in session about 15 weeks a year for a total of about 45 to 50 days per year. It's a pretty sweet gig. A legislative session is 2 years long. Yeah, and they just got an automatic raise for the holidays. Yeah, up to 106. Whew, sweet gig. Legislative session is 2 years long. The current session began on January 1st, 2023, and it's going to end November 30th, 2024. They actually take that last December off, always. And state representatives are elected every 2 years. They run 2-year terms. State senators are elected every 4 years. They run 4-year terms. So a bill becomes a law in the state legislature. This is the Schoolhouse Rock thing, but much more direct here, much more informative and less musical. And I'm sorry for that. I could sing this part, but it wouldn't come out well. So, a bill becomes a law with 6 votes and a signature. That's what it takes, 6 votes and a signature. So first, a bill is written and introduced either in the House or in the Senate. Then the Speaker of the House / Senate President, right? If it's in the House, Speaker of the House. If it's in the Senate President, is going to assign it to a committee. And that gets it to that number 1 here on this graphic. It gets assigned to a committee, and then it will get amended or not amended and voted out of that committee. So that's the first vote there. Then it goes into the caucus room for the second vote. And the caucus votes are not in the Constitution. They're nowhere in the law, but it's what happens to every single bill. It goes to the caucus room, and the caucus is where the majority party will meet behind closed doors and debate the bill. And if a majority of the majority says yes, then the bill passes that vote and continues. So it goes to the committee vote first, then it goes to the caucus room, and if it gets out of the caucus room, then it goes to the full chamber, vote number 3, and then it goes to the other chamber and repeats. So vote number 4, back in the committee on the Senate side, vote 5, Senate caucus, vote 6, full Senate vote. And then the governor can sign it into law or not. And if the governor vetoes it, doesn't sign it into law, then the legislature does this all over again and has to pass it with a 2/3 majority to override the governor's veto. And that's how a bill becomes a law in Pennsylvania. And before we even go on here, I just want to ask, are there any clarifying questions? Does this make sense here? How a bill becomes a law? Right. 6 votes. Yep.
I never heard about this secret caucus.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not something they talk about. It's not something that's official. It's something that's not in the Constitution. You will not find it anywhere in law, but they always will take the bill behind closed doors, and it needs to pass a majority of the majority party. That's their unwritten internal rule. The House and the Senate will oftentimes have different versions of the same bill called companion bills, is what they call that. But whichever one passes out of one chamber first becomes the bill in the other chamber. So it's really, you can get started in both chambers, but the one that moves first is the one that then has to get voted on by both. And if the House and the Senate pass slightly different versions of the same bill, there's something called a reconciliation committee where they'll come together and hammer out the fine details that differentiate the 2 bills, and then vote on it again and pass it. Okay. Woo, civics on a Monday night. Here we go. So now let's look at who controls those votes, right? The state legislature has a very, very authoritarian structure internally, and this very much shapes how legislators think, and it shapes how we interact with them. A lot of power is invested in a small number of people. The power to schedule those 4 official votes, so not the caucus vote, but those 4 official votes that are in the Constitution, the committee vote, the full chamber vote, the committee vote, the full chamber vote, those votes are held in the hands of 6 people. The power to schedule those votes are held in the hands of 6 gatekeepers. And these gatekeepers and their lobbyist backers wield extraordinary power over the rank and file. The rank and file are the legislators who are not in leadership, the legislators who are not the gatekeepers. And so these are the 6 gatekeepers for the bills that we work on. We work on, of course, anti-corruption, pro-democracy bills like the gift ban and ranked choice voting. And these are the 6 gatekeepers for those bills this session. So you start off with the committee chair in the House and the House State Government Committee. That's where all of our bills go. And you have Scott Conklin there. Then he controls the committee vote. The vote on the full House floor is controlled by Matt Bradford and Joanna McClinton, the House Majority Leader and the Speaker of the House. On the Senate side, the committee chair is Chris Dush, the Majority Leader is Joe Pittman, and the Senate President is Kim Ward. Between the 6 of them, they control if those 4 votes get on the calendar, whether or not they happen. And let's just look really fast at some of these committee chairs here, right? So these are the House committee chairs. Right. You see all of these different committees. So bills will go into these committees, whether it's the Health Committee or the Energy and Environmental Resources Committee or the Ethics Committee or Finance, right? There's all of these standing committees and the bills get sorted into them. And these are the chairs on the House side. And then we'll see right here, just to show you the chairs on the Senate side. These are the committee chairs. These are the gatekeepers for votes 1 and vote 3, or 4 if you include the caucus votes. And let's go on to the next one here, just to show you.
I think we're missing the slide with the leadership from
no,
each side, but I can link it in the chat if that's helpful.
Sounds good. And then there was going to be a slide of just showing you who the Speaker of the House is and the Majority Leader and just the whole leadership team. But yeah, so you have these gatekeepers. These are real people. They exist. They have names. They have images. They have thoughts and concerns and cares and worries. They're real people. Just wanted to show you them. And in a second, we're going to transition to learning about how these gatekeepers and their lobbyist funders use their extraordinary power to maintain a culture of corruption that dominates legislators' psyches and shapes their decision-making. But first, let's just slow down with the question here. What do you think legislators care about? What do you think most people in our society think that they care about? And what do they tell us that they care about? What do they care about? What are we told they care about? What do we think others think they care about? And let's just open this up for a discussion here.
getting reelected.
Getting reelected, right? Christian wrote here, job security. Yeah. What else? What do they care about?
The ones that I've met locally, not locally, but in Harrisburg, more from Lancaster and Philadelphia, actually do seem to care about stuff. I mean, Vincent Hughes seems to care about education. Viktor Frankl seems to care a lot about ceasing the gun violence. I mean, maybe I'm naive, but they seem like they're invested in this stuff,
Right. Some of them care about issues. Some of them care about, real things. Jason, you wrote in there campaign contributions. Absolutely, right? We're going to talk about that a little bit. Right. Andrea, you wrote in beating the other team, right? Getting that partisan advantage, making sure that your party's in charge.
Keeping their job.
Keeping their job. Absolutely.
Making sure they're reelected again and again.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Relationships that support their future goals, or their, whether it's a re-election or a job after being in the organization, or even getting some successes that they can say, hey, I did this.
Yeah. Right. Pride, ambition, social life, right? Building relationships just for the sake of having a social life, right? Just like any other human being. Yeah. Yeah, all good answers, right? Nobody here said the voters.
Maybe we don't
getting
feel. Maybe we don't
Well,
feel they care.
I was hoping they would care about the voters. I'm hoping that would be implicit, but you're right. It seems that more and more they are more intent on keeping power. Yeah, I wish that they would think about the lives of the people who voted them in, and how can we help people be more productive and have lives that, are meaningful and rich. I don't know. I guess I'm a bit naive.
Oh, right. And I just want to tease out here. This is, I'm sorry, Armando. Yeah.
Oh, piggybacking off of that, this might be kind of sick of me to say, but the gun violence, I always fathom, okay, what if their loved ones are killed by a terrorist, in a mass shooting? Maybe then will they change gun laws? If it really hits them versus other innocent people?
Right. People are often responsive to things that personally affect them.
I think nobody wants to see anybody killed or maimed by a gun, but I'm assuming everybody in this room is on the same page as me. I'd like to see less guns, but there are a lot of people who feel that more guns is the solution. More armed people is the solution, and making sure everybody's trained and knows how to use a gun is a solution. So when we walk into their office, and this is a good subject to talk about because it's easy to understand. So they say, oh, I feel terrible about the shooting, and I'm going to fix it. And if you don't drill down and ask them how they're going to fix it, they're going to fix it by putting armed guards on every corner, making it easier for people to get guns and ammunition, and get more money from the lobbies that pay them handsomely to do so.
Mm-hmm.
People have different approaches to different problems, for sure. Different solutions are out there that float around, and there's reasons why certain solutions are I'll say get more of a louder voice than others. But yeah, politicians are often responsive to things that affect them personally, right? Just like any human being will be. Whatever their response to that will vary, but they will be more responsive to things that affect them personally. For example, in Pennsylvania, the legislature passed a law this year affecting screenings and prevention for breast cancer patients. And the reason for that is that the Senate president herself had breast cancer. The law does not apply to any other disease. It's extremely specific, and it's because she herself was personally affected by it. So yeah, politicians often are responding to what they're personally affected by. But I just want to tease out, going back a few comments, a distinction between them wanting to keep their job and being responsive to the voters. Right, that winning a re-election and being responsive to the voters are two different things. And let's keep going here and really drill down into that.
I think there's a large number. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize.
Please go for it.
I think there's a large number of people who think that politicians are corrupt and irrelevant. And so they've withdrawn from being involved in any way. So when you say, what do people think about? They think, well, we this is one more of the things you have to deal with in life, but they're really not very relevant to what's important.
Yeah, absolutely right. People just give up and go home because they assume, often correctly, that corruption exists, right? But our response to that fact that corruption exists and they're not being responsive to us is not to check out, it's to make them be responsive to us, which is the goal of this class, right? It's to go and talk to them and make them be public servants. So here we go. What do legislators care about? So first, we just need to start with the acknowledgement. Legislators are human beings. Just like the rest of us, they are human beings, which I know can be hard to hear sometimes because they often don't act like it, but they are. And their priorities and their concerns cannot be overgeneralized or oversimplified. They are each unique individuals, and they each represent different districts with different pressures and different concerns. Last week, we sat in the office of a state rep who had a bottle of whiskey on his desk, and he talked about the difference between public servants and politicians. Public servants ask, "What can I do for you?" And politicians ask, "What can you do for me?" And there are public servants in the legislature, and there are politicians in the legislature. And there are many who exist on the spectrum somewhere in between. And our job is, of course, to bring out the public servant in everybody and to, knock back the politician that exists in everybody. And so while we are talking to 253 unique individuals and their unique staffers, we also recognize that everybody who works in the Capitol is operating within the same ecosystem. And that ecosystem is one of corruption. And that ecosystem contains a whole set of incentives and disincentives that shape behavior. It contains carrots and sticks, and everybody's living in that world. And we're all living in that same world where the golden rule is that the guy with the gold makes the rules, and that the name of the game is trading money for power, and all public power is for sale. Would somebody like to read this quote here from the Hampton Institute?
Everything becomes a commodity under capitalism, including the government. Politicians are commodities bought and sold by capitalists. Legislation is a commodity bought and sold by lobbyists, employed by capitalists. Politicians from both parties represent capital, not people. Wow.
Right. Corruption is the mechanics of capitalism, right? It's the mechanics of it. It's what it looks like in practice. It's the function of it, the action of it. And the idea is that just like in our greater economic system, everything can have a price tag on it. Everything can be assigned a dollar value. Everything is for sale. Everything is a commodity to be traded. And, we have kind of a popular conception, or at least what media and politicians tell us all the time, is that your vote is your voice, and your elected officials are fully dependent on and responsive to the voters. And frankly, the fact that nobody in this class said that 2 questions ago really speaks to, I think, why y'all are here. This is a pretty self-selecting crowd, right? But we're constantly told or screamed at, in my case, by politicians that money has no influence on their public service. And of course, the opposite is true. Our elected officials are responsive to the will of big money, and they're disconnected from the voters. And that's not what it's supposed to be. Our government is supposed to be in relationship with and responsive to the people. But it is in fact in relationship with and responsive to big money special interests. And that's what we're all about changing. And so it can be helpful here, just to give a quick metaphor on the next slide, to really approach this as if it's a family dispute. Right? This is a quote from Gandhi. Who would like to read this one?
We are to apply here the same principle that we follow in a domestic quarrel. We should think of the government and the people as constituting a large family and act accordingly.
Right. Thank you, Leslie. So this is a quote from Gandhi to just kind of reframe this, right? Where we are the divorce lawyers. We are the marriage counselors. This is how we look at our lobbying, at all of our nonviolence. We are the divorce lawyers here to separate money from politics. That's our goal. This is a family dispute. They're cheating on us with big money special interests. We're here to divorce that unhealthy and toxic relationship that hurts people. And we're here also to be the marriage counselors, to heal the wounded relationship between we the people and our elected officials. This is supposed to be a government of, by, for the people, responsive to we the people, and we're here to work on that relationship and make it so. So we're going to now study how our state legislature is cheating on us from a few different angles, how the money consumes them with rewards and punishments, and how they are structurally disconnected from the voters. And this is going to help us get at the question of what do they care about? How do they think? How do they calculate things in their brains? And so let's start with campaign contributions. Money and power are closely intertwined in our legislature, and campaign finance is the biggest money of the big money by dollar amount. If you are to run for office, of course, costs money. This is just a chart with some numbers here. State rep, tens of thousands to millions. State senator, hundreds of thousands to millions. Governor, millions to tens of millions. U.S. rep, millions to tens of millions. U.S. senator, tens of millions to hundreds of millions. U.S. president, billions. And I'm sorry, governor, we need to update because the last race actually went into hundreds of millions. So it's now millions to hundreds of millions. And that's what it takes to run for office. And that money comes from people. And if you are really good at campaign fundraising, you get to buy your way into the leadership team. You get to become one of those gatekeepers, because one of the big responsibilities of being a leader in the legislature is fundraising. You bring in campaign money, you dole it out to your colleagues, and that's how you become a leader. That's how you become Speaker of the House or the Senate president. And the campaign fundraising allows for lobbyists to act as the facilitators of those campaign contributions. And in that practice, they determine who gets to be part of the leadership team, who gets to control the agenda. So right away, as legislators run for office, they learn that the lobbyists and their principals, their backers, decide who gets to run a successful campaign with slick mailers, TV ads, and a well-paid campaign staff, and who has to run against a well-funded challenger as well. They also decide who is going to have stiff competition backed by millions of dollars. And then they also get to decide who has the cash to buy the most power within the legislature and buy themselves a gatekeeper position in a very highly authoritarian structure. So campaign contributions automatically, if you're a legislator, you think, okay, if I take the money, if I can raise the money, if the lobbyists like me, I can go places. I can have power. I can get my seat. Gifts. And we're going to dive deeper into this one in week 4 when we study the gift ban. But, gifts are the social part of it. They're the fun part of it. And if you play ball and if you go with the flow, you're going to get that campaign money to run for and win your seat. And you're also going to get gifts. You're going to get to have a fun time with the lobbyists, vacations, dinners, sports games, concerts, etc. And the flip side of that is that if you are not a team player and you don't take the gifts, you don't get to have the fun. You don't get to go with your whole family to the Penn State game and sit in the president's box, which is where our governor and his family were last week. You don't get to go to Pebble Beach and go golfing there. You don't get to enjoy the unlimited wining and dining and the open bar tabs. And not only do you get frozen out of the social scene, but if you don't play the game and partake in the social scene, your bills don't pass. You're marginalized within the legislature. You're an outcast. There's a legislator, a former representative named Tom Mert, who told me about 5 years ago, he came into office, and between his election day and his first day in office, he got a letter in the mail with tickets for the Eagles game that weekend in Philly. And they were really good tickets. They had sideline passes, free parking, all you can eat food, really, really good tickets. And Mert knew, and they were from a very big campaign donor in the district, a very wealthy developer who gave a lot of money to the party, statewide, but especially in the area. And Mert knew what this meant, and he wasn't going to play ball. And he put the tickets back in the mail and sent them back with a note that said, please come see me in my office if you want to talk about something. I'm a public official. That's where I work. And the donor realized right away what this meant, which was this guy is not going to play ball. And he stopped giving money in the district, in the area, and statewide to the party. He said, I'm done. If I don't have their ear, what's the point? I'm not giving them any money. So the leadership in Harrisburg went to Mert and said, you cost us a whale. You cost us a huge donor. Everything you came here to accomplish will not happen. And he told me this 10 years after that had happened. And he said, it's true. I've been here 10 years. Nothing has happened. I came here to fight for disabled veterans. Not a single thing has moved. Nothing. If my name's on a bill, it's just dead on arrival. And so the gifts really shape how they play ball, how they think about this. And if you don't take the gifts, you get marginalized. So it affects your behavior. And if you do take the gifts, you're hanging out in a phone booth with telemarketers in fun settings. And let's go for the next slide here. Right? If you do what the money wants, also another pressure, another big carrot is that you're going to get a future job. And your next job is going to be way better than your current job. You're going to get to work as a lobbyist. You're going to make a lot more money. You never have to face the voters in any way whatsoever, even in tilted ways. You just don't have to look at them. And so lobbyists, because they're often former legislators themselves are often auditioning for that job to become a lobbyist, because the lobbyist used to be the legislator. It's just a revolving door. There was one, first, I'm sorry, let's watch this quick video here from Jack Abramoff, who's a DC mega lobbyist, former DC mega lobbyist.
But the best way to get a congressional office to do his bidding, he says, was to offer a staffer a job that could triple his salary.
When we would become friendly with an office and they were important to us, and the chief of staff was a competent person, I would say, or my staff would say to him or her at some point, you know, when you're done working on the Hill, we'd very much like you to consider coming to work for us. Now, the moment I said that to them, or any of our staff said that to them, that was it. We owned them. And what does that mean? Every request from our office, every request of our clients, everything that we want, they're going to do. And not only that, they're going to think of things we can't think of to do.
So in a legislator's calculus, a lot of the time when we're meeting with them, we have to keep in mind, who are they working for? Is it this job right now, or is it their next job? Back in 2019, when the gift ban first passed out of the House State Government Committee, there was an amendment that was introduced in the committee that day, and it passed along party lines. And we had never read this amendment before. We were blindsided by it. And it was introduced by a representative, Gobbler, who we didn't even know was interested in the bill, but he was apparently. And he introduced an amendment that put a loophole into the bill. It was a pretty big loophole that he put in. And then a couple months later, he resigned. He's my age. He's a young guy. He resigned from office, and he became a lobbyist for the paper products industry. And so when he came in that day to gut the gift ban bill, to weaken it, was he working as a public servant, or was he looking toward his next job as a lobbyist? So that's something to consider when you're thinking, how do these people think? A lot of them end up becoming lobbyists. Also, as a legislator, even though you're a full-time legislator, you're allowed to have side jobs, and those side jobs can have blatant conflicts of interest. So when you're talking with a legislator, you need to keep in mind, not just are they thinking about their next job, but are they thinking about their other job right now? because in Pennsylvania, you can legally have side jobs. A few examples here. Senate President Corman, our last Senate president, was on the board of a bank while he was a Senate president. He's in charge of Pennsylvania's finances through the budget, and he's also working as a bank board member. Our former speaker, Mike Turzai, was also working as a high-powered corporate attorney out of Pittsburgh, representing Fortune 500 corporations, while he was our full-time Speaker of the House, same time. The current chair of our Senate Environmental and Energy Resources Committee, right? The gatekeeper for all energy and environment bills in Pennsylvania, is also a practicing attorney for gas companies, Gene Yaw. He works 2 jobs. So you have to keep that in mind when you're talking to these people. Are they working their current job or their other job? And there was a state representative, DeLuca, who passed away this year, I'm sorry, about 1 year ago, almost 1 year ago to the day. And he used to say, when I'm sitting with my colleagues, I don't know who they're working for. And I don't know who I can trust when they're talking about what issue, because I don't know what their other job is. And with side jobs, we have a little bit of knowledge and transparency, but there's also a lot that's just in the dark, especially about how much they get paid. We really have no idea. Next one here. Dark money. This shapes their thinking. Dark money shapes their thinking. And this one really does shape their thinking in a big way because it's so shadowy and hard to really know what's going on. Dark money is untraceable. That's why we call it that. We don't know where it comes from. We don't really even know how much of it is out there. The US Supreme Court, which itself has a huge corruption problem, decided that money is speech and corporations are people. And that really bizarre line of logic concludes that corporations have the freedom of speech to spend unlimited amounts of untraceable money influencing our elections. That's what they decided. And so dark money often shows up in those negative attack ads that you see, those mailers that come out 2 days before an election with Pennsylvanians united for justice and freedom and the love of puppies and candy canes and all things that are good. Or United for Democracy or Club for Growth. That was Pat Toomey's one, right? These are just bizarre names that sound generic and nice and sweet. And they send out mailers that say things like Representative so-and-so is a puppy kicker and you should vote him out of office. They really just, they actually got Dr. Oz on that, right? That was a Democratic dark money that went after Dr. Oz. Went after medical experiments that he'd been a part of involving animal testing, and they basically called him a puppy. I mean, it was really something, but that's what dark money does. And it's a tool that's used by big money special interests to translate money into a tax or protection of elected officials. Dark money can hurt you. It can also protect you. It can be a shield. Minnesota and Maine recently actually banned dark money political spending from multinational corporations. And they define multinational as more than 5% of its stock is owned by foreign shareholders. And that includes almost every big corporation, because almost every big corporation is a multinational corporation. Right now, March on Harrisburg, we're actually working with a group of Penn Law students who we've been working with for a few years. And right now they're working on bringing this idea into Pennsylvania policy to introduce a bill to ban foreign dark money spending on Pennsylvania elections. And just a quick funny side story from last week in the Capitol. I'm sure you're all aware of the Bob Menendez scandal in New Jersey, where he was taking gold bars from an Egyptian businessman. So there's just one of our champions in the House this week joked that he's going to introduce a bill that just specifically bans accepting gold bars, and just to see where his colleagues land on that. And he anticipates an amendment to allow for silver bars. That someone will sneak into that at the 11th hour.
There you go.
Right. So we just looked at 5 ways that big money demands and commands the responsiveness of legislators. Right? If you want to win office, if you want to have the power to actually do something while you're in office, if you want to be a gatekeeper, then you need to take the big money. And if you play ball and you take the big money in its various forms, you get to be a gatekeeper, you get to determine whose bill gets a vote, and you are shielded from the voters behind a wall of cash. You are shielded from the voters behind a wall of cash, right? And you end up with this, with the golden rule of, instead of love your neighbor as yourself, it's the guy with the gold makes the rules. So let's talk about which bill gets a vote here. We just talked about Maine passing that dark money ban. They did that through a ballot initiative. A little over half the states have a ballot initiative process. Pennsylvania does not, right? In Maine, in California, in Washington State, and other states, you can pass a law by going directly to the people, putting the law on the ballot, and then having a vote on it. You can legislate without the legislature. In Pennsylvania, you can't do that. You need to legislate through the legislature. That's the only way to pass a law in Pennsylvania. And we need a ballot initiative process in Pennsylvania. It's on MarchOnHarrisburg's agenda, but we don't have one yet. And so for now, we have to work through the legislature. Last September, the gift ban had already passed out of the House State Government Committee. It had already passed that first vote. And it was being blocked from getting a vote on the House floor by then House Majority Leader Benninghoff, right? One of those gatekeepers. He had made 2 broken promises, so be it. It's what sometimes politicians do. So we decided to bypass the gatekeepers with a once-in-a-century nuclear option in the House rules called a special order of business. Stay with me on this stuff, it's wonky. There are nuclear options in the rules to bypass the gatekeepers, and they literally are once-in-a-century things. And so we were doing that. We were going to launch this legislative coup against the way things are done and force them to vote on the gift ban. And it was, as the press called it in that headline at the bottom, it was a clandestine plot. This was secret stuff because our champions were terrified. This had to be secret. And the most common thing that they said to us, our champions, was not, I'm afraid of losing campaign contributions, or I don't want to lose my Hershey Park season pass tickets from the lobbyist. I don't want to lose the gifts. It wasn't, I'm afraid for my next job, or I'm afraid for my current side job, or I'm afraid of the dark money. The most common reason we heard was, just, I want my bill to pass. I've been here 10 years. I have 3 bits of language wrapped up in an omnibus bill. If I do this, they're going to yank my bill text out of this bigger bill, and the whole reason I came to Harrisburg in the first place doesn't matter. I've accomplished nothing. If I buck the system, if I go against the trend, if I launch a legislative coup, if I bypass the gatekeepers to do the right thing, they're going to make sure that everything I came here to do does not happen. They're going to block every single bill that I introduced. They're gonna yank my amendment out of this other bill. They're gonna just, for lack of a better term here, crap on my dreams. They're gonna make it so that everything I came here to do will not happen. And so that's just one more big stick and carrot there. Whose bill gets a vote? A few other sticks and carrots here. 3 more substantial sticks and carrots. 1, committee assignments. Right, legislators are fearful that they're going to be assigned to a committee that they know nothing about instead of the committee that they want to be on, where they can actually work on their bills. So that's one more thing that they're afraid of leadership for, and leadership, of course, is responsive to big money. They're afraid for their staff. That's something we also heard actually last year during that clandestine plot was, I may be retiring, but I have 3 staffers who've been working with me for 15 years, and they need to get another job within this legislature. And if I do something, they're going to get fired. And one of them just had a baby, and that can't happen. Right? So the staff is controlled by the leadership. The party leaders control your legislative staff. And if they don't like you, they will take away your staff. Whatever you think of the guy, Doug Mastriano got his staff taken away from him last year by Senate President Corman, while they were running against each other for governor. It's really something when your political opponent can just take away your legislative staff. And their furniture. The furniture is not owned by each legislator, it's owned by the party leadership. And they are not above taking away your furniture. Or if you've had the same office for 25 years and it needs to get repainted, well, the funds to repaint it just aren't there. Your old office chair, you're stuck with it forever. The copier that's broken, too bad, you're stuck with it. And in extreme cases, your desk will just get moved out into the hallway and it's no longer yours. So these are just some of the sticks and carrots here. Now let's take another step, another angle at this and talk about who got them there. Who got them there? Right? How do people end up in the state legislature? And of course, it helps to be able to fundraise really well from people who have money. It helps if you take their gifts and their job offers. They will protect you with dark money and campaign contributions, and you have a huge advantage. But it isn't just the big money in all of its forms that gets you elected, and re-elected too for forever. It's our rigged electoral structures that lead to candidates often never having to face voters in an honest election. Because while some elections matter a lot, most of them don't matter that much. Most are non-competitive. Most are not real threats to public officials. And so this very much shapes their thinking, who they're responsive to. So let's start with gerrymandering. When we think about what legislators care about, we have to challenge one of the big myths that they constantly tell us, which is that they care about your vote. Because more often than not, they don't. Sometimes they care a lot, but more often than not, they don't. Gerrymandering is when politicians pick their voters. It's when our state legislature draws the maps that determine the districts that candidates run in. And gerrymandering creates non-competitive districts where one party has a locked-in advantage over the other. So every 2 years, all 203 of our state house seats are up for election, and half of our 50 Senate seats are up for election. Right, our senators run 4-year terms, so every 2 years, 25 of our 50 senators are on the ballot. So this means there are 228 legislative elections every 2 years in Pennsylvania. Some of you might know the answer to this question from the Disrupt the Corrupt tour, but those who do not, that number on the bottom right there, in 2022, out of the 228 total elections, how many of them were within 10 points, somewhat competitive? Who wants to take a guess? How many were within 10 points, somewhat competitive? Jason says 10%. Good guess. Let's go to the answer. Jason's close enough. Well done. 9%. Right. 21 out of 228 were somewhat competitive. 21 out of 228. Only 9% of general elections were somewhat competitive in our Pennsylvania state legislature in 2022. This is a two-party cartel setup where the two major parties divide the turf. They divide the voting public, and they don't compete on each other's turf, except 9% of the time in those purple districts. Delaware County, Dauphin County, Lehigh Valley, or the other ones in the state. Sometimes Montgomery County. There aren't many of them. Everywhere else in the state, it's pretty locked in. And what gerrymandering does and how it shapes our legislators' thinking is that it allows for the party leaders, for the leadership, to protect themselves and each other, and also to hurt legislators who step out of line. There's no shortage of pettiness in Harrisburg. They use these things as rewards and as weapons, as carrots and as sticks, to attack those who buck the trend and go against the money, and to reward those who know how to play ball. I was staying with a friend in Harrisburg recently who's in law school, and she told me that one of her professors is this guy named Professor Teplitz. And I went, wow, so that's what happened to Senator Rob Teplitz. He's a professor at law school now, because about a decade ago, Senator Teplitz fought to outlaw gerrymandering. So what do they do to him? They drew him out of his district. He lived here, his district was this area. He still lived here, his district became this area. He didn't know anybody, he didn't know the issues, he didn't have a campaign infrastructure or volunteers on the ground, and he got trounced, he had no chance. right? All because he tried to outlaw gerrymandering. It can be used as a weapon against you. Happens all the time. It's also used as a reward. I live in South Philly. That's where I'm coming from tonight. And a few districts over from me, the other side of South Philly, there's a representative who had a campaign manager, actually, who was very disgruntled with him and was going to knock him out. His old campaign manager was going to challenge him in the primary. And wouldn't you know it, that person got drawn out of that district by half a block. The leadership was protecting Representative Hohenstein from a potential challenger by drawing the challenger out of the district by half a block. It's surgical, it's precise. So legislators have to think about that big carrot and that big stick. And if we keep going here, so gerrymandering makes most general elections non-competitive, and primary elections are made less effective, less responsive through our current setup of closed primaries. In Pennsylvania, we have closed primaries. Independents are not allowed to participate. Third-party members are not allowed to participate. And so this forces everybody into one of two boxes, into one of the two major parties. And if you refuse to go into one of those two boxes, you don't get to vote in the primary. And because the general elections are so rigged through gerrymandering, the primary is often the only thing that actually counts a little bit. This disenfranchises 1.23 million Pennsylvanians. That's 14% of Pennsylvanians. And that rate of independence, our 14% rate, is actually very low. If this was a state with open primaries where you had freedom of association, it would be closer to 40%. Nationwide, that's the amount of people who consider themselves independents. So this discourages candidates from having to care about what independents and third-party members think. They don't have to be responsive to them because you cannot build a winning coalition with them. So why care about them? You don't have to be responsive to them. And just one more distortion here that separates the will of the people from our elected officials is winner takes all voting. It isn't just who votes that matters or what district lines we vote in, but how we vote matters a lot. And the way we vote now is not a very smart way to do it. We have what's called winner takes all voting. And this means that it's not the candidate that's supported by a majority of candidates, by a majority of voters. It's the candidate that wins more votes than anyone else. That's what matters. So you can win an election in our system with 20% of the vote. If it's a six-way race, you can win with 20%. Happens all the time. You can win with less than a majority of votes. You only need to get more votes than everybody else. So we're going to study ranked choice voting in 2 weeks. That's part of week 4. We're really going to dive into this one, just like the gift ban. But for this week, we're just going to leave it at this. In a winner-takes-all system, you do not need a majority of votes to win, so you can be a very divisive and toxic force that plays to a very small base, partisan base, right? People in your party. Third-party challengers in crowded primary elections get discouraged by what's called the spoiler effect, where you can have two similar candidates split the vote, and a third unpopular candidate can win without a majority of votes. And voters end up trapped in a lesser of two evils system and feel very unrepresented. And we're going to talk more about this with ranked choice voting in a few weeks. A few other disconnects that are built into our system here, just to name a few other things that lead our legislators to be non-responsive to voters. Special elections, there's a lot of these. We have a lot of special elections in Pennsylvania. We average about 4 a year or so. This year we've had 7, or we'll end the year with 7 total. And special elections are when a legislator, oftentimes I'm sorry to be so crass here, they just drop dead in office, and it happens pretty regularly. And when they do, they get replaced in a special election, or they seek higher office, they become a congressman, they abandon their state representative seat, and you have to have a special election. And special elections cost the taxpayers about $1.5 million a pop, and the candidates on the ballot are not people who won a primary election, they're people who get appointed by the local party committee. So a lot of people get to Harrisburg through special elections They never actually win a primary election of any kind, and it's often just a case of either nepotism or failing upward. There's legislators who win special elections. For example, Representative McNeil, the old representative, dropped dead in office. His wife was appointed by the party committee and becomes the new state rep, and there she is today. Maria Donatucci here in South Philly was a similar example. Her husband passed away in office. She became the state rep through a special election. So it's very common for nepotism to dictate who comes in through a special election. And then failing upward. Just a quick story of a representative out in Western PA who, when we asked him, why did you come here? How did you end up in Harrisburg? And he said, well, the old state representative was retiring. The local chamber of commerce was having a meeting to decide who they were going to back to send to Harrisburg. And I'm part of the chamber of commerce, but I missed the meeting. And because I wasn't there at the meeting, they elected to send me. And so that's why I'm here. Another one from a Philadelphia rep who said, that he was part of the union leadership in South Philly. And basically other people in the union just didn't like this guy. So they sent him to Harrisburg to get rid of him. So people will fail upward as well to get to Harrisburg. It's very common. And one more just disconnect here that we just have to note, and we'll talk more about this one in a few weeks as well, is just the propaganda. Next slide, I think. Right, it's just the propaganda that they live in, right? Just like us, legislators, right? They're human beings just like us, and they live in they are bombarded with the nonsense of well-funded, intensely propagandized echo chambers. The single worst thing you can see when walking into a legislator's office is cable news on the TV. That is the single worst determining factor of how the meeting is going to go. Because if they have cable news on the TV, they're going to blame everything on the other party. They're going to accept no responsibility for themselves. And they're just going to take the conversation to the national circus in DC as often as they can. And I say this is the single worst thing. We've had plenty of meetings where when we're walking in, a mega lobbyist is walking out and looking smug, like they got there before us. But I'd say the worst thing is cable news on the TV, because that's when they're really in too deep. So back to the question, what do they care? Oh, I'm sorry, time for a break. Everybody.
Break time.
We're going to meet back here at 8:07. 8:07. Please go to the bathroom, do what you need to do. 8:07, right back here. We will definitely be building these breaks into each class going forward too. Didn't do this the first week, but welcome back, everybody. So we're going to keep going just a little bit longer and do a little discussion, and then we're going to close out here. But let's get back to this question. What do they care about? What do they care about? We've just been learning about this, right? They care. Well, I'm sorry, go back one. Right, so what do legislators care about? They care about keeping their leadership and the lobbyists who back them happy, so that they will be shielded and rewarded with campaign cash and dark money, lavished with gifts and side jobs and future revolving door jobs, so that they won't be drawn out of their district or opposed by a well-funded challenger, and so some of their bills might have a chance of passing. But of course, no substantial bills can pass because those actually upset the lobbyists and the leadership. So you try to eke through with crumbs. And they don't really need to care about the voters, especially if they're in a non-competitive district and are shielded with cash. And so when we're talking with them from the outset, we cannot help them with any of these things. In fact, the more they support our bills, the more at odds they become with the leadership and the lobbyists, and the more at risk they are of being attacked by cash and marginalized within the legislature. The pressures from the corrupt ecosystem are real. That's why they exist, right? We all know this. They're devastatingly effective. They shape the way these legislators think. So we play to both their selfishness and their selflessness. These are some of their selfish attributes. And playing to their greed is tough. We can do it a little bit, but we're not armed with Super Bowl tickets. We can't really help them go to the Bahamas, but we can punch them in the wallet, and we do it pretty often. We often punch them in the wallet through nonviolent direct action. We crash their fundraisers, we generate in-district opposition, and we make them respond in district by spending a whole lot of campaign money. For example, the House Majority Leader Benninghoff from last session, there was a challenger in his district who was upset about the gift ban, so he ran against him. There was no way he was going to win. The district was gerrymandered extensively. It was a rigged race, but he ran against him, and he ran a great race, and he called him bought off Benninghoff, and he knocked every door. And Benninghoff, even though he wasn't going to win, he had to spend a lot of money in district, which meant he couldn't buy the votes of his colleagues to be in leadership. And so he lost his leadership position, even though he still won his state rep race. Right, so we can hit them in the wallet. We can disrupt their fundraisers. We can make them spend money inside. We can harm their greed a little bit. Sorry. And we can play, though, very effectively to these other three things there: their reputation, their power, and their ambition. A lot of legislators are unknown. They don't want to be known. They're quiet people. This is the best job they'll ever get. They're rank and file. They don't want to be known. There was a representative who just retired named Representative Sankey, and he once said, "My voters don't even know where I go to work. My neighbor says to me when he sees me leaving, 'Give him hell in Washington.' You don't even know. He goes to Harrisburg, not Washington." Right? A lot of these people are just unknown in their community, and they like it that way. And so giving us the wrong answer in a lobbying meeting is a direct threat to their selfish reputation, their selfish ambition to not be known, because we will make them known. And then some legislators are really ambitious, right? It's not that they don't want to be known, they want to be known, and they want to be known in good ways because they're going to be running for higher office, and they are going to need the voters, especially new voters who don't know them, statewide voters, national voters, and they become dependent on them, and they care a lot about not messing with their reputation for their ambition purposes, for their power-seeking purposes. When we met with John Fetterman a few years ago when he was lieutenant governor to talk about general assistance, which is a welfare program that ended up getting cut, that Governor Wolf signed off on the cutting after the Republican legislature passed the cut, the Democratic governor signed off on it. Fetterman was lieutenant governor, and one of the first things he said to us was, please don't milkshake anybody. And this was that summer when British politicians were getting milkshakes thrown at them. I don't know if y'all remember that. That was a thing for a whole summer. British politicians were getting milkshakes thrown at them. And Fetterman had his eye on higher office, and he really didn't want somebody throwing a milkshake at him, because that would have cut into his ambition for higher office. He knew it. Right now in the Capitol, everybody and their cousin knows how to talk to Josh Shapiro. And the way to talk to Josh Shapiro is to say, hey, we know you're going for the White House. If you pass this bill, it'll really help your presidential run, because everybody knows that guy is ambitious. I mean, he's in his first year as our governor, and he already went to New Hampshire to get ready for a presidential run. He's ambitious. He's going places. So you can play to their ambition. And then on the selfless side, right, these are the things we speak to here. Right, on the selfless side, we speak to their responsibility, their goodness, their belief in fairness, their belief in democracy, and more. Right? Legislators are human beings. They have hearts. They feel things. They have dreams. They want to make a good name for themselves. They believe in things just like the rest of us. And that can be hard to grasp, but they do. They're human beings. A lot of them come there for the right reason and just get sucked into the culture of corruption. And this is what we really speak to here, is their selfless nature. We try to move them toward their own highest and holiest ideas. We try to make them manifest their deeply held convictions. Remember in week 1 when we talked about how people exist kind of in the middle a lot of the time. We all have the greed in our hearts. We all have the generosity in our hearts. And the idea is we try to bring out the best in them. This is where conversion happens, is when we speak to the selflessness, where a true conversion can happen. And just a quick story on this. There's a representative who, we were talking with about the gift ban, and he wasn't really getting it. It wasn't really sinking into for him. But then he made it real to a value that he holds dear, which is protecting children. And he made the connection out loud that these lobbyists for the casino industry, for the video game gambling industry, those video game gambling things that are in truck stops, he said, they're putting these things in the candy store in my district. They're going after the kids. And he started tearing up and getting really upset. And he was able to take that selfless value of caring about children and understand how corruption was hurting children. And he signed on to the gift ban bill right then and there and became a champion for it, because he was able to bring that selflessness out of himself. He was able to make it real and make that manifested. Another state rep, another story, there was a state rep who once said that she does not take gifts, so who cares? Because she doesn't take them, and her Judeo-Christian values state that she's only responsible for her own behavior, and she's not guilty. So why are we even talking to her? And we flipped that on its head and said, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel summarized the entire Hebrew Bible as the answer to to Cain's question, am I my brother's keeper? After Cain murders his brother, Abel, and God asks, where's your brother? And Cain says, am I my brother's keeper? And Heschel says that the entire Bible is the answer to that question. And the answer is yes, you are responsible for each other. You may not be guilty, but you are responsible for your colleague's behavior. You are responsible for your sibling's behavior. And that flipped a switch in this legislator, and they became a supporter of the bill and did what we had asked them to do. So you can draw out that selfless nature. You can draw out that love, that sense of responsibility, that belief in goodness, that belief in fairness, that belief in democracy. And that's our best weapon. That's our tool. That's the tool of nonviolence. That's the tool of the conversion that we're going for. And next week, we are going to really dive into these two things, selfishness, selflessness, how to speak to both of them, and how to really lift up the selflessness. That's the goal always, is that conversion. Yeah, let's go to the next slide here. And we're going to do, let's do some breakout rooms for this one. We'll keep it short, just a couple minutes here, just like last week, to give you all an opportunity to catch up with someone else and process some of this. But, just the questions to discuss, and please feel free to go off script if you want. But how many people do you know who have talked with a state legislator? When people think of being politically active, why do we often limit our thinking to the act of voting? Why is talking with them such a rare thing? And these questions kind of are other focused, right? How many people do you know? But it's really you focused. Have you ever talked to a state legislator? Do you sometimes find yourself in that trap of thinking voting is my primary voice? And why can it be so hard to talk to these people? But let's just go into breakout rooms, and also feel free to go off script and just catch up with your partner. And we'll call you back in a few minutes. Welcome back. I'm gonna mute everybody for background noise here. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Does anybody just want to share any burning thoughts that came out of the group? Please. Anita, go for it.
Well, one of the things we talked about is that it's the Capitol itself in Harrisburg. It's very intimidating. It's confusing. I think as far as speaking actually with a legislator, that rarely happens. You often talk to their staff, and the staff is multi-layered, especially if they are in leadership. And it's a very difficult thing to do the first couple of times that you go and talk to them. Maybe because we put legislators on some kind of pedestal, and it's hard to approach them. And that's from my perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. They wear fancy suits. Their offices are hidden in a maze of tunnels. The second floor is actually the third floor, or the E floor, sorry, and the fifth floor is really the sixth floor on the house side. It's a very confusing place. Absolutely. Jason.
I forgot to mention, I met my state senator, and it was him and 4 of his staffers. So it's 5 of them in and I'm just like, okay, there's a bunch of people here. And then so he would say something, and then the other person would say something, and then somebody else would say something. So that's like, okay, I need to just sit back. They need to tell me something. Let me listen. I need to just listen. Okay, and then go, okay, well, and then just try to draw them out. Like, I know you always go in there with talking points, and it's kind of like, all right, I'm dealing with actual people, so I need to just say, here's the one thing I want, and then just keep in mind the one thing you want, and then kind of let the other stuff kind of go, and then at some point you just say, oh, well, would you sponsor this bill, or how do you feel about it? You think you can sign on, you think you can consider it, and then you just jump in there. That's one of those things you just have to do, because you never know what actual situation you're going to be in, where there's 10 people, 15 people that you walked in with, and one person, or there's 15 people staring at you, or there's a bunch of people, like if you do gun legislation and they've got the little AR-15 pins, you still got to talk to those people, because they're there all the time. You just end up talking to them even though you're very dead set against a certain issue. It's just one of those things. You just have to kind of relax and go, I know what I'm here for, and I deserve to be here. And you just go and just deal with people as you can.
You're here. Absolutely right. It can be intimidating when it's a 5-on-1 meeting, and they'll do that. They'll load up their staff. I remember my last meeting with the Speaker of the House last session, Brian Cutler. He had his chief of staff on the call in the meeting, and I think that guy talked for 59 out of 60 minutes, and that was role there was to suck all the air out of the room and not really let anything happen. And Jason, you nailed week 5 of this course already, which is focus. Focus is so key, right? You know what you're there to do. You focus, focus, focus. You don't go for the distractions, the diversions, the deflections. And we're going to circle back to that in a few weeks. I mean, you just nailed the whole. That's the one of the hardest things to do in those meetings is to not take the bait and go off the rails. Let's take just one more reflection here, and then we'll move on.
I think it helps to team up with some groups that have pretty well organized the going to the legislators, like Education Voters or Housing Alliance or Ceasefire. I mean, they've sort of set up the appointments, and they've got people together to go in teams. I think it helps to be with them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely right. If you're doing this on your own, what do we call a lone person speaking up for justice in this society? We often call them a crazy nut, a lone wolf, the guy on the street corner in a soapbox, right? But when you're in a team and you have a strategy, that makes that makes you legitimate, right? That makes you real.
Yeah.
So yeah, doing it as a team, doing it in an organized manner breaks down that intimidation, right? And it makes them more responsive. Absolutely. Right? If you're not part of a larger strategy, it's blowing in the wind. So let's keep going here, and please, anybody else, please leave thoughts in Slack, and we'll talk about that again in a second here. But please, let's keep this conversation going from week to week through Slack on the Political Education channel, and we'll circle back to that. But also, we're probably going to be here till about 8:32 or 8:33. Just apologies, we're going to go a couple minutes late here. But corruption is the root issue, right? That's the premise here. Corruption is the root issue. Government is how we make collective decisions. And until we fix the ways that our government makes decisions, we're going to continue to not make good decisions. And that systematic corruption and the subversion of democracy make our government responsive to deep-pocketed ruling class special interests. And this leads to bad decisions, leads to policy violence toward the working class, and that causes massive, massive suffering. And the promise of democracy, democracy is the solution. Let's go to the next slide. Democracy is the solution. And when our people in our communities are able to participate in the decisions that govern our lives, we make decisions in the public's interest rather in the interest of corporations. When public officials are accountable to the public, they will be public servants rather than employees of an oppressive ruling class. And so our goal is to make corruption illegal, build democracy. And as we always do, we end with some course announcements. You're going to get an email with the recording of this. Please feel free to share it and invite others to join in the next class. The next lobbying course is the same time next week, same exact Zoom link as this week, 7 to 8:30. Giving Tuesday is coming up. I always forget when that is. I think it's next Tuesday. Anyway, please feel free to make a donation to March on Harrisburg if you feel so moved. I can guarantee you that we are not funded by major lobbying firms or fossil fuel corporations or Comcast. I was about to say we have no corporate backers at all, but Ben from Ben & Jerry's does give us a couple $1,000s a year. So take that for what it's worth. PAC, Pennsylvania Action on Climate, is doing a direct action on December 2nd in New York City. If you're interested in joining that and disrupting the Pennsylvania Society and having a good time, please reach out to myself or Andrea. Thank you, Mackenzie, for reaching out. I hope you and Andrea connected. Okay, excellent, perfect. And then December 12th is the next lobbying day in Harrisburg. If you want to come lobby with us in the state capitol, we'll be there December 12th all day, starting around 9 a.m. in the morning and ending early afternoon or mid-afternoon. But people, somebody always leaves early to get to work. Don't feel bad if you have to dip out earlier or show up a little bit late. Get on Slack if you're not already on Slack. If you're not on our Slack, please send us an email or post your email address in the chat right now. And Slack is our internal communications platform, and you can get connected with your chapter leader there. It is the official. One second. Do I still have this? Yes. Ben & Jerry's, just they send a check and they also send a coupon. It's very nice of them. So I
Don't we
guess
have a coupon for like an ice cream party or something like that?
we really do. God, we were working with Ben and Jerry's and they agreed to do it, but the logistics just fell through to set up a free ice cream giveaway in a very sensitive location to draw people there. We were going to combine a free ice cream giveaway with disrupting a golf course fundraiser for Senate President Corman last year. But it fell through for all sorts of reasons. But yeah, we still do have that in our back pocket to use at some point for an action. It's just
And a plane, right? We have a plane too.
I
Yeah.
saw a plane that wasn't able to fly over the golf course because it was too rainy that day. One of those planes that pulls a banner like you see at the beach. So we do have the deposit down for that as well. So we have a free ice cream giveaway and an airplane with a banner in our back pocket for future actions. And so, yeah, so please do get on Slack. I see Anita and Mackenzie. Thank you. Thank you. Andrea, are you good to invite?
Yes, and I'll also send out a Slack invite link that'll just take you right to the page with the recording as well.
Perfect. Thank you. And then the Poor People's Campaign is meeting in Harrisburg. We're having mass mobilizations in 35 plus state capitals. So please do put this on your calendar. March 2nd and March 4th, Saturday, March 2nd in the afternoon, Harrisburg, big Poor People's hearing, big rally. And then Monday, March 4th is a demands delivery in the state capitol with some nonviolent direct action. And just to highlight what Andrea wrote in the chat, December 12th, it really is a good learning experience to come do this as a group in the Capitol, and we're going to be learning the rest of this course how to do it. So please do put that on your calendar as a time to put this in practice. Anything else for the good of the call? Any other burning questions? Okay. For love and democracy, all forward together, not one step back. Have a good night and see you all next week.
Thank you very much. To you as well.
Bye, all.
Good night, all. Peace.
Learned so much. Thank you.